Hello, I'm Dominic Hobson, co-founder of Future of Finance. My guest today is Jim Rao, CEO of OneTransfer, a company whose mission is to be the first transfer agent for the digital world, by which he means the world of security tokens. Jim, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Dominic. Appreciate it.
Now, transfer agency is usually cited as a victim of the widespread use of blockchain technologies because of what they do. They keep registers of securities issued. You can do that on a distributed ledger. They record changes of ownership. That's also built automatically into the digital ledger. And they also distribute dividends. And smart contracts sitting on ledgers can also do that much more conveniently. So what persuaded you that you wanted to be in the transfer agency business?
Well, it was part of it. It was really an extension of some of our other activities. But for me, it was dealing with transfer agents in the traditional sense and all of the problems of kind of yesteryear's technologies and being frustrated that things weren't moving along at a faster pace and using more of a technology solution. The historical and traditional transfer agent business has been one that's been highly manual. It's been paper intensive, and it's prone to things like errors and obviously speed and just the cost. It's when you've got a lot of human hands touching something in an error now that most of this can be programmed, and whether or not it's blockchain or whether or not it's just even automated. The transfer agent business historically has been one of like a number of other businesses out there that just hasn't had the transformation into the third or fourth wave of the Industrial Revolution.
So your first ambition was simply to make it more efficient and less manual. Now, as I said a minute ago, you are describing yourselves as the first transfer agent for the digital world. I said, I hope accurately, that means you want to support security tokens because I'm assuming here that the transfer agency function is completely irrelevant to cryptocurrencies, but for the tokenization world, it clearly has a role to play. Now, is that going to be the primary focus of what you do?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. Just to touch on the cryptocurrencies, that's not required for a transfer agent. So that's really not necessary there. But our focus is the private securities of the transfer world. That's our first priority. So anything around that, and if it's in the U.S. context, that would be Reg D, Reg CF, Reg A, those types of things. So that's our primary focus at the beginning.
The privately managed assets market, would that be the area you expect to tokenize most quickly?
I'm not going to be the tokenizer, but yes, I will be the working to make sure that issuers can distribute their digital assets, their digital securities, their tokens, whatever name you want to use, to those investors. And then when those investors buy and sell those particular tokens or digital securities, that we have the most efficient way of exchanging them.
And is your business going to be relevant to the existing securities markets as opposed to the security token markets? You indicated a while ago that you got pretty exasperated with the way the TA business works in the world today, let alone in the tokenized world of tomorrow. Is your business purely going to focus on the token side, or is there work that you can do usefully with the traditional markets as well?
Well, eventually it will be for any security, any commodity contract. It could be anything that actually has a smart contract component to it, would be eventually where that target market is. But we have years to go before you're going to backfill into some of the traditional aspects. There's so much, there's still regulatory hurdles, there's still technology hurdles, there's still a lot of, there's still some distance to go just even in the new products. So if you're issuing a token in the United States or outside of the United States and you want to digitize it, tokenize it, there's still a lot of activity to go there and really prove out a lot of models and get the standardization aspects working before you try to retrofit something. That market is clearly going to go digital, go token at some point, but it's not going to go at the pace most people think. It still takes a long time to have a technology replace an existing incumbent technology.
So the good news is that you can grow with the new token market as it takes off. But I'm right to say that your firm, in other parts of your business, you have actually tokenized private assets as opposed to what most of us do, which is actually talk about it at some point in the future.
Yeah,
Is that true? And what did you learn from that experience about what a TA could do?
it is true. And we have worked with a number of issuers that have actually gone from start to finish, actually capital raise, and actually gone to tokenization. And then upon tokenization of the distribution to the ultimate investor or shareholder, we've worked on that on a number of occasions. So yes, we have done it in practice and not talked about it in a bubble. So the frustrations you have, as I mentioned, there's still infrastructure that needs to be built out. And if you look at how blockchain, digitization, tokenization came about, it was one of the rare times in financial history that you actually had something come from the bottom and not the top. And what do I mean by that is that normally innovation of the financial sector has come from the big boys, and it usually then gets pushed down to the smaller players. With tokenization, digitization, blockchain, that actually the groundswell was from smaller players looking to find something better and different. So the infrastructure or the concepts came from the bottom up. So you had some regulatory challenges. You also had a lot of incumbents not necessarily enamored by the concept of digitization, because a lot of people know that it makes things more efficient, it squeezes out margins, democratizes things. And those are usually ideas, concepts, and values that if you're an existing player, you don't necessarily want to have the apple cart upset.
Now, transfer agency can mean slightly different things in a US and a European context. In Europe, we tend to think of transfer agents serving mainly mutual fund issuers, and TA means keeping a register of who owns which units in a mutual fund, and it settles the transactions, and it shares data back with asset managers about what's going on. It's been a relatively low margin and low esteem business. In the United States, it means it encompasses the security industry as well. Now, are mutual funds a target market you're interested in going after as well?
Absolutely, they are. I wouldn't say on day one. I would actually say anything that is a registered product or something that has a public nature to it, on an exchange, or that has somehow had a regulatory component that it requires it from going outside of a private placement, is eventually a target market for us. It is not the target on day one. And depending on the jurisdiction, you mentioned very good example there with mutual funds. In the States, we wouldn't go after that for a little while, because that's going to be a longer road. So really our focus is primarily going to be on the private security basis, and move from there. In other jurisdictions, depending on where we end up working, because we're really trying to be a cross-border solution, not just a US centric or European centric or EU centric type of a program. We're actually trying to knock down some of those walls that keep securities and keeping a lot of these activities from being efficient. So we want to be a proponent to positive aspects. I personally look at the transfer business as a way of connecting and creating a digital highway, so to speak. So if you have buildings, be it countries or what have you, is trying to create a toll road that is very, very fast, very efficient between those locations. And I think that analogy actually is pretty good, because I'm indifferent on what rides on the road. I just want to make it efficient and fast, that it can actually get from point A to point B as quickly as possible, and have that exchange between counterparties be known, be KYC, be AML, be all the types of things to make it more efficient. That's really the goal.
Mm-hmm. Actually, a conversation about the tokenization of transfer agency is now beginning in Europe. And I assume from what you've been saying that tokenization of shares in mutual funds would make that a more attractive market for you once that process is underway.
Oh, absolutely. What we've designed for one transfer is a little bit different in the sense that the focus is not on just profit alone. We're actually it's a consortium that we have right now. And we're adding additional members all the time, but really it's to knock down those walls so core businesses can actually transact faster. So we're looking at the one transfer business as, you call it a co-op, you call it a utility, you call it whatever may be the right definition for it. But what we're looking at is to have it so it's an unbundled process. It's not you don't have to have all these other services along with it, but it allows you to be able to exchange those digital securities, whatever they may be, as efficiently as possible between, different groups and eventually between different jurisdictions.
Can I ask you about the sort of core functions? What is one transfer actually going to do for issuers of security tokens? Give us a list of the type of things you expect one transfer to be doing.
Yeah, so much like any transfer agent, we would obviously be maintaining a cap table. You have the aspect of being able to actually move shares from one place to another. It's almost like a bicycle messenger service, right? You're just going from potentially one custodian to another, et cetera. So that's there. We have some technology ideas to basically manage some of the dividend payment ideas differently and being a different kind of pay agent. And then depending on the jurisdiction, there can be escrow services and some of the other things that become kind of quasi banking. So depending on the regulatory environment and the jurisdiction and the rules will dictate what we're able to offer in certain locations.
Now, we're expecting security tokens to make use of smart contracts to automate the the functions of different types of securities, whether they're bonds or equities, and to do that algorithmically with minimal, indeed zero, human intervention. How exactly is one transfer as a TA going to interact with those smart contracts? Is your occupation gone as a result of smart contracts or not?
No, not necessarily, because you're still going to it still needs to be effectively wired in. So whether or not that's on an API function or other, I'm not the technology expert when it comes to the granularity of it, but the whole concept is very much to establish that and make it a low-cost solution. So if the issuer wants to do something in a certain way, the transfer agent should be able to facilitate that with technology and not have to use manual labor to do it. So if you have a structured finance product that's maybe more sophisticated than a normal just a dividend payment, we believe that function should be managed and can be managed with the right smart contract programming, and then having that transfer agent be able to take that effective code and put it into the payment structure. And in that way, if you had something like a income participation note, or if you had a commodity contract where you had an underlying yield component that was a flat, and then there was a ratio of payment based on some benchmark or index, that the transfer agent could take that smart contract, get that coding, and then make those payments on behalf of the issuer without the issuer having to reinvent the wheel each and every time to do all of the manual accounting process to make those payments to the shareholders. So for example, if you had a commodity contract and you were selling an oil deal and you were to do something and you had a smart contract that said, we will pay you a 4% yield monthly, and we will also give you 10% of the increase between Brent and WTI, or whatever structured product or structured concept actually came out of that, we'd be able to take that and make those calculations and payments on behalf of the issuer efficiently using obviously the combination of smart contracts and a blockchain based TA.
I mean, as you've just described in your description there of a smart contract, making use of presumably some sort of data oracle, as they're called, these security tokens are going to represent underlying assets. That might be commodities, might be digital securities, might be assets put into some sort of escrow structure, but those will be underpinning security tokens. That seems to call for some sort of custodial function, which is normally done by banks. Is that a business you want to be in or not? Custody?
Yeah, great question. Is it something you want to be in, or at some point will you be forced to be in? I also, a little bit, Dominic, it also is, we're going to see, like in any evolution of a technology, it's going to end up bleeding and crossing over. So you could foresee where custodians become transfer agents, transfers become custodians, or what have you. I believe it's going to be technology-wise, it could all be done by one group. It ends up becoming a trust and a regulatory issue, and a number of, there's other issues that are going to play a part in that decision-making process. So would I like to be? Not necessarily. Would we do it if it made sense and you had the ability to do it? Yes.
Now, this whole conversation has kind of proceeded on the basis, and we've used the word technology a lot, but we've proceeded on the basis there's going to be some sort of blockchain technology that one transfer is going to sit on. Can you tell us any more about that? Which particular technology you're planning to use?
Yeah, well, right now we're using a traditional transfer agent software system. It's been known for years, and that is to get in business and get our processes going and getting the reputation of being able to execute on that. And actually, we're already, we're only a couple months old, and we're already executing on some client activity already. So we're already going down the road in a kind of a hybrid situation, in the sense that we're doing traditional, but we're doing some things that are kind of value add right now. But we are in a big effort, a major effort with our consortium partners to identify and have an RFP in process to have that blockchain solution created. And we are deep in that, and hopefully we have that kickoff. We've selected our partners, and we're moving down the field within about the next 30 days is our plan. So sometime around September 1st, we expect to have a partner or partners, and to be able to build that infrastructure. And there's a lot of groups out there that have done parts of it. Some have solutions. We're exploring all activities and all aspects, and have taken a kind of a white sheet, fresh kind of piece of paper, look at it and say, this is what we want, and how do we get there? And that's where we're working. So you have a number of blockchain vendors that have half the answer, 80% of the answer, et cetera. So we're just filtering that out right now, and hopefully we have that solution pretty quick.
Do you have a timetable in mind to actually go live with the blockchain solution after it's built?
I have an idea. Whether or not the tech team can get there, that's a different story. My personal desire would be something in the first quarter of 2022. I doubt that that's a realistic activity. It's probably second quarter, but it depends on a number of factors. But it's imminent, but it's not tomorrow.
Now, whatever technology you use, TA is a famously manual process with lots of reconciliation and data changing hands in all sorts of analog forms. So if you're going to revolutionize the commercial economics of the business, you're going to have to come up with some method for enabling data to flow seamlessly. And obviously not all of that is under your control. You're going to have to deal with managers and issuers as well. So do you need, to make a success of this, do you need some kind of agreement on data standards or standard computer protocols, or just use APIs and spatchcock them together? How are those data flows going to work?
Good question. It is, I think the start becomes standardization, as in just about everything, whether or not I was early on in some of the ISDIF thing, some of these standardization contracts, and I'm a big fan of standardization myself and personally. I think that's where we need to go first. And this is also a reason why when we started the consortium, we didn't have anybody or anything claiming that they could do the technology. which it was important for us at the consortium because we wanted to have that freedom of thought to basically pick and choose the right solution and not be burdened by a shareholder or some kind of influence. So for just to go back to the standardization question, that is critical. And then our hope and goal is that this is really, an API, or it's really connected to anyone that is in the issuer, space. And our goal is to have an unbundled, very clean. We're going to start off with a very clean service right at the beginning. That is the transfer agent business cap table. And then we can add bells and whistles from that, but we want to run and get really good at one thing. And then we can add some of these other functions and features. With that, though, the standardization is kind of a cross section of both, cap table, some of the payment structures, these types of things. So we're trying to answer the simple piece first, and then obviously with the optionality to add more advanced technologies on top of it without having to retrofit.
Right. Now we talked a minute ago about smart contracts, and in a sense, we have a standard in the smart contract area because 90% of these smart contracts are sitting on the Ethereum blockchain, and they're written to the ERC20 standard. Is that going to be helpful to you?
Well, at any point you have a standardization, at least now you have a benchmark to compare and contrast. A lot of tech people, or at least a lot of blockchain purists, would argue that ERC20 is far from a perfect scenario. I would say that I don't really have a dog in that fight, so to speak. But for me, it goes back to the analogy I used as far as having the toll road. ERC20 is like having a particular model car, on it. It's a truck or whatever you might have, is hauling that particular security from one location to another. I want to be, and I want transfer to be agnostic to whether or not it's ERC20 or 10 other type of technologies. It should be built to where it should be able to handle any of that smart contract or any of the smart contracts that are out there and be agnostic to whatever that technology is, much like I'm describing in a toll booth, right? You pay your toll and you move down the road. So for me, that's where we need to be. I don't want to tell anybody or have a restriction that you have to be ERC20 or you have to be X, Y, or Z. I think that defeats the purpose of digitization. It flies in the face of the democratization of where we're at, and it just goes backwards in time. And that's what we've seen with some of these technologies that some of the FinTech companies have come out today. They come out and they're building walls instead of knocking them down. I kind of want to be, Ronald Reagan here, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall is really where we should be, not building walls. We should be tearing them down.
Talking of tearing walls down, you mentioned you're working with clients already. I assume that's issuers rather than investors, and do correct me if I'm wrong. But in the securities industry, it is highly intermediated right now. And in the mutual fund industry, it's arguably even more intermediated. You have distributors, for example, and distributors work with platforms. You have IFAs, you have all sorts of people. Who do you need to sell your service to primarily? Obviously issuers, but do you need to work with investors and intermediaries as well? Or is there just one particular group that would govern success or failure for you?
It will be heavily issuer driven at the beginning, then it will be investor driven secondarily, and then you'll have a lot of screaming and hollering of the intermediaries in between, because clearly blockchain efficiency, digitization eliminates some of those functions. In some cases in blockchain, you can go from what was 20 steps down to 2, and that takes out a lot of hands, a lot of mouths. So you will see some incumbents screaming and hollering along the way, but like any business, if you don't change, you become a dinosaur and you die. So I think you're going to see a lot of morphing. A lot of people are going to take on. There's going to be some new business models created, new services generated. It always happens. Very similar to, when the mechanized farming equipment, replaced the plow horse, right? So people just did different things. So I think you're going to have that. Some of these businesses will go away because they're just become redundant. But I think it's issuer, investor, and then the intermediaries. But one thing I would say is that I think the process is going to take longer than people believe it is. It always does. It takes a long time to replace a technology. And you just look through history, the recording. I mean, look how long it took the DVD to replace the cassette. I mean, it just takes a long time before a technology usurps another. And I believe in this particular space, because you're talking about some of these organizations and groups, and regulators end up becoming as much of a problem, teaming up with some of the incumbents that don't want to see change. It could drag out longer than really it should, but that's a different argument.
Yeah. Well, I can see the future vision, issuers and investors in effect interacting directly through a technology infrastructure. Now, in order for that vision to be realized, you need lots of issuers and you need lots of investors to be on the network. And as you say, the intermediaries who presently intermediate those relationships will have to change. How important are network effects going to be? In other words, getting lots of issuers and lots of investors onto the network, and how hard is it going to be to do that?
Well, it's amazing. Issuers are trying to do what issuers want to do, and that is, if you're a oil and gas company, you're a renewable power provider, you're a media company, whatever particular industry you're in, you want to be good at that. You don't necessarily want to be focused on transferring your ownership or your shares. So they want to outsource those functions for the most part. So they're driven by anything. They want to be able to have the lowest cost solution they possibly can, have it as efficient. They don't want to have it a problem. They want to be compliant. They want all of those things. And that's what's going to drive a lot of this. So it's going to be issuer driven. And a lot of times that's just simple cost. And if you can't be cost competitive, then why are you doing it? So I think it's going to be driven from the issuer about creating that space. I think there was a little bit of a misstep in a lot of the tokenization and digitization aspect, where everybody thought the investor was going to drive a lot of this activity. I think there is some of that, but I believe in the TA space and the technology transformation in this particular piece of the market is going to be issuer driven, because they're incentivized to have a clean cap table. They want to be able to communicate with their investor groups, their shareholders, their stakeholders, whoever it happens to be. Whoever their bond buyers, whatever it happens to be, they want to be able to interact with them efficiently. And if they can't do that, they'll find a cheaper, better solution, more technically proficient to make that happen. So that's my belief.
Listening to you explain the vision now, at a high level, I can see why this is attractive to issuers. I can see why in the longer run it's going to be attractive to investors. But I've been dying to ask you this question: what on earth made you? What was it in the mix of businesses that you're involved with now, the other things which you've done, and what you're doing at Entoro in particular? What on earth made you want to get into the transfer agency business?
When you look around and you look at the whole value chain, and you say, where are the pieces that can actually cause you heartache, and to be able to provide optionality to an issuer. And that was where I've always been, is like, how do we do that efficiently? So we have Entoro has an investment bank. We are a broker dealer in the United States. We have SEC RIA. We have our own valuation company, so we're pretty integrated across a lot of activities. And one of the things for us was we don't have a TA position. So a couple of years ago, we actually applied, and in the US, it's not a particularly onerous activity to get approved by the SEC to be a transfer agent. It's onerous to have it, once you're up and running, and you have to have a lot of rules, but we were already regulated by the SEC and FINRA, by the broker dealer and by the RIA. So having one more component wasn't that much of a lift for us. So, and it filled in a service aspect because for me, I want to be able to go to an issuer and give them optionality. Or if they come to me and they say, Jim, we would like to hire you to do everything from A to Z through the entire process of, raising capital, issuing, through the whole financial process. And I'm like, great, if I'm going to do that, I need to have that extra component. So we had filed for it and we had it all ready to go. But I also want to have that opportunity that if you have an issuer, they want to do something a la carte. So I want to be able to play both fully integrated and a la carte. Both strategies require that you need a TA business exposure capability or be able to provide that service. So one day a colleague and I are sitting around going, to just start a TA business, do you have enough business to, what do you need to be successful at this? And we're both like, this is really a business that should be a utility, a consortium, a co-op, back to my opening line. And it made a lot of sense to do that. So we actually had filed for one and under our own name. And then what we did was we went out to some like-minded individuals, some ATS operators, a protocol group, some other the digital transformation FinTech groups, and we started a dialogue and we said, okay, we need like-minded people with the same vision, and that wasn't hard to find. What was hard to do is get all those people in one room to agree on it, and that was the biggest challenge. But that's where we ended up. So we all wanted to have exposure to a TA. We didn't necessarily want to be the full-time operator of it, because we all looked at it as the TA business is a transformative business that is eventually, as we've already talked about, may become so automated that it really doesn't have it's not a standalone business on itself potentially in 10 years. We look at it as an integrated service solution to all of us. So if you look at it, each one of us having a building, we just wanted to build a better digital highway, a digital toll road between us all to get those things, get those securities and moving faster. So that was where we were at. It was really a service aspect for us to be able to provide a turnkey solution to an issuer.
Now, Jim, one last question for you. You've seen the future, you've seen what needs to be done, you've seen what there is to be gained. Put yourself in the shoes of one of those incumbent intermediaries we talked about a minute ago. You described very clearly you thought they had to change. What advice would you give to those, let's call them conventional transfer agents in business today? What sort of future do they have? What should they be doing?
Well, I think it's one of two strategies. Either you bury your head and you try to ride it out and do nothing and you just wait for your business to go away, but you bleed it to death. I mean, that's a legitimate strategy. Or you change and you modernize your own system to either be a blockchain solution or a digital solution, because there's lots of FinTech companies coming up to change your business model. Not only probably on the TA business, but in a number of areas. And it's kind of either upgrade or perish. And, I think many of them will. I think some of them, like in any industry, you'll see that some go away because they just don't have the management teams that have the vision to do something different, or they refuse to do it, what have you. That always ends up being an option. Then you also get the groups that basically say, we're not very good at it, but we're going to buy somebody. Okay. So, we could get our particular project up and somebody comes in and says, that's a good strategy. Maybe we just take that. We rally around that strategy as a transformative business model. And then they migrate it in. Airlines have done it. The energy industry's done it. I mean, there's a lot of, examples out there of other industries that have taken on that same strategy. I believe, like in every business out there are too many players overall. I think there's too many players in the energy space, and there's way too many fragmented players in that. I can tell you, even in the U.S. broker-dealer market, there's 3,000 plus broker-dealers. There's going to be a consolidation of that. Every single industry is going to have consolidation. Those management teams that have that are in the incumbent position are going to be faced with these same questions that any industry has, is that do we step out of our comfort zone and we explore other options to make sure that we're still relevant? Because if they keep their same pricing model, with technology, you can come in and you will eventually commoditize most of this. And if you're chasing a commoditization, the only other alternative you have is some kind of unique service on top of it. Otherwise, you won't be in business long.
Upgrade or perish. It's a sobering message for the TAs of the world. Jim Rao, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you, Dominic.